Hi, I'm John from P3 Tuning. We are a motorcycle tuning and parts company. And today we're going to do full ECU mapping along with a DNA panel filter, Bonamici rear set with the full race tools package, which will allow us to have a pit lane, launch control and quick shifter. Woo, exciting. Let's go. Righty-ho. First thing we're going to do when we start in any mapping job is basically get a baseline. So that baseline is exactly how the bike is as it was presented, apart from a few little checks. So we make sure that the tyre is good, chain's good, and the oil's good. Make sure they're all good, get all our data on there, and then give it full power run. That'll give us a full scope of how the engine's performing and how the fueling is right now. And that will be our baseline against whatever we change and how it improves. So that's what we're going to do now. So first things first is strap it down, get a load of probes in, and then do those little checks. So we've done the tyre, chain, oil, all that sorted. We've got to cap the pair valve, which on these you can't externally cap it that easily. It's a bit of a faff because they're quite... Packed together? Yeah, let's go with packed together. So they're really rammed together better. So we actually cap it from internally inside the airbox. Obviously there's a caveat with that. Make sure it's not going to fall off and go into the engine because I don't want to take an engine out on one of these today. So that needs to be really secure and really tight. So that's on. This is just for a base run though, so I'm not going to take the air filter out and check that yet. It's literally just to put that on. We've got an RPM signal off the ECU. Now, sometimes you can just pop this panel out and go onto the coil, but for this, we don't need to bother taking all this off, so we'll just go off that. The sniffer probes are in the exhaust, so that's done. We're pretty much ready to start warming the bike up, and we'll warm it up and then go through the gears and then let it heat soak for 15 minutes, and then we'll jump into the runs. Let's go. We're gonna check the oil. It's cold right now. I just need to make sure it's there or thereabouts. I'll check that again in a bit, but for now, it's got oil in, so we can warm it up. Oh, that's a bit tight. So, it's a touch tight there. Done. We've torqued it all back up. Whenever you're doing these as well, whenever we adjust them on flats, so it's a hexagonal bolt, so we go flat hexagonal to the next flat hexagonal, and then it keeps it even either side. And then as soon as you go to tighten it back up again, really force that wheel forward, give it a good shove, make sure the adjuster bolt is hitting the block and it's not, there's no gap there. Because if you just let go of this and tighten it up, naturally, the wheel's going to slide back a little bit, and then you, especially on this side where it's not being pulled forward by the chain, there'll be a gap. Always push it forward and then tighten it up and torque it all up, and then lock everything off. Sorted. Base run's done. We're at 148, 152-ish, there or thereabouts. So the blue is me full chat gunning it, and then blue is more of a progressive roll on. Basically to just give you a more, so whenever we give the graphs over, obviously it's all well and good having 100%. That's kind of irrelevant most of the time, especially if you're on the road. You're never gonna be at 100% throttle at 5,000 revs, realistically. So to give a better picture of how the fueling is, we do a run that's as you're just picking up the throttle and all the way through the transition throttle positions and the engine speed, so it gives you a better idea of how the overall performance is. Also, 100% throttle is not as governed as the rest of the area, because if you're gunning it everywhere, the emissions aren't going to be tested there, so the manufacturer can actually make the bike fuel fairly well there. So that's not what we need to look at. We need to look more at the lower down and smaller throttle positions, which is obviously what that's for. And you can see it is actually really, really lean there, which makes sense. This has got a K&N panel air filter and a, we call them an S link pipe and Yoshi can. So it's already going to be opened up that fueling area quite a bit, basically meaning there's not as much restriction there, so the engine's going to be able to breathe a lot more air, and it doesn't know to compensate with more fuel. So right now, it's running very, very lean. It's actually into the 15s. That's obviously a bit of an issue. It's going to generate a lot more heat. It's going to make you feel a bit more aggressive and a lot more snatchy. So we want to cure that by adding more fuel. We're also going to do some other stuff as well in the mapping, which we're going to do now. So we've done base run. Now it's a case of blow it apart again. Because we're fitting race tools and stuff, we're going to do that at the exact same time. So the ECU will get read. We save a log of that. And then if we ever need to revert it back to stock or we need to go back a step, we've always got that on hand so we can go back. But we'll put our base flash in there and activate all the race tool features, get everything back together again, and then run it again. And you'll see the lengthy process of actually building fueling tables, and this is the same for ignition tables and lots of other stuff. It is literally just run after run after run to get tons and tons of data and then go into the tables and do them. So I'll show you that now as well. So the race tools application for this is different to some other bikes because this isn't fly-by-wire. So it means you won't get auto warm-up and auto blipper, but you will still get quick shifter, pit lane, and launch control. So launch control is it's a stepped rev limit. So it's stepped at a certain speed and gear. What that means is rather than it bouncing off the standard rev limit at like 13.2 or whatever, it will actually limit it to like 7.5, or well, we can set it to whatever, but we set it to normally about 7.5. What that means is if you are racing it or having a lot of fun on the road, just sat at a set of lights, just absolutely nailing it, it will basically not be generating tons and tons of heat at 14,000 revs. Or also it'll actually help you to get off the line, because if you've got it revving super hard and super aggressive, it's actually more likely for the clutch to not grab as easy and give you the drive and stop itself from burning out. So that's what that's for. Quick shifter, standard. If you don't know what quick shifter is, you're on the wrong channel. And pit lane, so that you can turn up to your road, and as you turn into your road, you just press the pit lane button and go all the way down to your house, which is fun. Or at the pub. Majority, it's a pit lane limiter, so it's for pit lane. So it limits it to a certain speed, like 30 mile an hour. But as I say, you can just have fun with them if you wanted to. They're actually not that bad. They're quite good fun. Oh yeah, that's pretty crusty, that is. Yeah, it's full of all kinds of things. I mean, you could do a botany class in there. Right, we'll get that washed, re-oiled, and then that can go back in as well. It's another part of the process. We need to make sure that the air filters are clean, because it's pointless mapping a bike with a dirty air filter. We'll also clean out this, full of crap as well, while we do everything else. So ECU's over there reading. Air filter's gonna go and have a bath. And then we'll get to do Bonamici. Right, we are reading the ECU, which on these KN ECUs takes a very long time. I mean, these take about an hour. The later blades and the CB1000s up to like 22, they take about 2.5 hours. Same with the VFRs. They're painful, but we've got other things, exciting things to do, which is get the rear sets off and get the Bonamici ones on, so we're going to do that. We've also got to fit the race tools kit, which the race tools kit doesn't look an awful lot, so basically it's just mainly a sensor and a shift linkage and then some plugs. So the plugs fit in line with normally like the oxygen sensor. I think on these it's actually the exhaust control valve, so we'll fit it in line with that. And then on the gear shift side, we'll put it onto the linkage there. That's pretty much it. So all you'll see is this tiny little sensor on that left-hand side, and then the wiring should just disappear and you should never see it again, basically. But then you do have a sensitivity adjustment. Now these normally is just to change which orientation they are. So if you go from road shift to race shift, this will have a little up sign on it. So when you turn it on, you press both buttons, it'll say up, and then you can push the lever in whichever way it is to go to second gear. Now that can be down in race shift or up in normal conventional road shift. And then it'll learn, and then you're off to the races. So that's what we've got to fit as well on the other side. As I say, the actual package isn't an awful lot. We also fit an additional thing on this, which is the button. So on that left-hand handlebar, where the clutch perch is, we'll just have a little button drop down there as well, and then that'll be to access your pit lane limiter as well. And that, again, the harness for that will just disappear. You shouldn't see any of the harness. It should be pretty tidy if you do it properly. If you don't, you can just have the wire running like right across the tank or whatever. It doesn't really matter, I suppose, but you know. No, the pipe's discoloured, so you normally get them in the clear. Yeah. They look kind of like the bottom bit on the top bit there, where you can see straight through them, and then they go cloudy over time because the brake fluid actually eats away at the whatever the hell the material is, and then over time it just turns into that. Just the way they go. Okay, so whenever you get rear sets, you got to make sure everything you take. I've mentioned this before. Even though sometimes some of it is built up in the packaging, ignore that entirely. Take every single bolt out, Loctite it, and torque every single one. The other thing as well with rear sets is if you're buying rear sets, assume that they do not have a way to mount your standard brake switch, which is this, because they never do. So you have to swap it out to a hydraulic one normally, which is exactly the same as what we're going to do to this. So we're going to take that banjo bolt out, swap it in for a pneumatic banjo bolt, and then we will rewire this plug so it can still plug in and still work. It's just the way that they come. They're racing rear sets, so obviously they don't expect it to have a brake light. So a bit of a faff, but it's just one of the things that you got to do. Sorted, but pretty. We've now got the left-hand side on as well. Look at that. Fantastico. Bella. Again, as I said on the other side, make sure you Loctite and torque every single bolt on this. So these already had bolts in, but no bueno. They have to come out, they have to be Loctite, and they have to be torqued back up when you put them back together again. That's all done. Now on these as well, you've got an adjustable toe piece, and this is because as you adjust the position of the rear sets, which you also need to make sure that the left-hand side is the same as the right-hand side, so the position is the same, otherwise it feels weird. Then because of the fact that this can move, you've also got an adjustable toe piece with the Bonamici to be able to position it so it's in a comfortable position. And then it's the linkage. So for this, because we're obviously putting race tools on it, which what race tools is you need a quick shifter sensor. That sensor is a strain gauge, so it feels the push and the pull of the lever, so when you go up and down the gears. And because of that, this linkage has to be set as well. Whenever you're setting any gear linkages, it's really, really critical to make sure that the pivot point to pivot point and pivot point to pivot point, these are parallel. So what you need it to be parallel, so what you're doing is it magnifies the turning forces all the time. If these aren't at 90 degrees, then it means that you're possibly going to turn this rather than a rotation into a push, because as soon as this goes past a certain point, it's now not going to rotate the linkage anymore, it's just going to push the shaft up and down. That means you're going to lose you're going to use up an awful lot of energy to try and get it to change gear. It's not going to be smooth. It's going to mean that you're going to need a longer kill time to be able to get it to change gear. It just causes lots of grief. So make sure that these are in position to magnify the forces and maximize the rotation on that shaft. Sorted, that's all done. The other thing as well is whenever we're setting these up, we'll also set it in a position where you've got adjustability of the linkage up and down. So we'll have a lockout on the top and the bottom of the main part of the linkage. So you've got a male and a female thread. So as you adjust this out, it will then extend this linkage down, which will then lift this up, and then same vice versa. So as you screw it in, it will also drop it down. That actually makes it a bit easier, because the last thing you want to do is set it all up so that if it's good for us, and then the customer comes in and they can't get their foot on it properly, and then it's impossible for them to adjust, or they have to take the bolt off and adjust it at the top. That's crap. You want it to be able to be just these two little nuts, crack them off, adjust it, lock it off, happy days. Other thing that we see all the time that people make a mistake on is they won't double up on the nut, or they'll thread straight into the sensor with no nut on there. Biggest problem there is you're possibly going to damage the sensor by completely decking out inside here. What you want to do is whenever you're doing these, whether you're screwing the top rose joint in or the bottom one up, you want to go all the way in so it just touches nice and gentle, and then back it out a full turn and then lock it off there. That way it means that there's no chance of you damaging that sensor, because that's got to be able to move, it's got to be able to feel the force. If you completely deck it out, the chances are you're going to damage it and it's not going to be able to feel the forces anymore. So just be gentle with them. On this, you would normally have a nut locking against the sensor and a nut locking against the shaft. but this shaft is actually all one piece, so that is actually part of the shaft, that threaded bit. So you don't need another nut down there. But normally, if this is threaded both ends, you would need a double set of nuts. And then the other thing as well that we've done on this, just for extras, is it's got a race shift, gear shift support. So what these do is it basically adds an extra support right before where your lever is going to be, where the linkage is going to go. And what it essentially does is it holds onto that shaft. Ooh, important, sexy stuff. Holds onto that shaft, and again, it stops any lateral movement up and down and forces it into a rotation, so that you go, normally, if that wasn't there, when you lift this up and down, you would see the actual shaft go up and down. Obviously, that's not what we want. We want it to turn, not to move laterally up and down. So that's what that extra bearing does. It just gives it that extra little bit of support right before the linkage is mounted on there. And therefore it maximizes, again, the forces. It also shortens how much movement you've got in the lever, because some of that movement is actually to this float. So getting rid of that means it's more positive. Quicker gear changes, less likely to cabbage a gearbox. All good in my book. Right, we have now got, obviously, as I've just described, that's all down there. So the sensor is on. The next thing we've got to do is this has got to go on and this has got to get plugged in. So this will get laid all the way through here, and then where it plugs into is the exhaust control valve and the diag port. So on this, it's got a gear indicator which is plugged in, which I'm not calling it lazy, because, you know, do it the way you want to do it, but that's a bit lazy. So I may rewire that as well. But the line's going to go into this. Now, he will maintain his gear position sensor, because the way this works is it has a jumper, so that when you plug this harness in, it'll also be able to still have a diagnostic plug, so that if you ever needed to do diagnostics on it or have something permanently fitted, such as that gear indicator, you can still maintain all of that. Then it also fits into where the exhaust control valve goes. Now this I'm just showing you because I'm going to neaten it up, and hopefully you'll not be able to see any of it because I took it underneath the fuse box. But then you've also got the exhaust control valve, which obviously we're not using anymore. It hasn't been used for a while, clearly, because there's not cables on it and that exhaust has been fitted for a while. So this is going to be removed and put in a bin, probably, because who needs an exhaust control valve? That's that going. The air filter is now being washed. Look, you can kind of see through there, it's pretty clean. So it's sparkly, sparkly fresh. That's then just got to be oiled, because it is a oilable filter. The amount of these that we see with bone dry, nightmare, don't do that. The oil actually holds on to some of the finer particles to stop it from going through the actual filter element. Important if you want to actually keep your engine going. If you don't care, let it go bang, it's fine, don't oil it. But we will. So that's got to get oiled, and then that can go back in. And then we start to do the mapping process. So we'll flash the ECU, which we'll do in a minute, and then we can get on with tuning it. Sounds like a good idea to me. We did hit another little problem. See this little fella down here? That is a neutral switch. And I don't know what's happened. I don't know if at some point a rodent has lived in this vehicle, because there's, if you look through there, you'll see that there's like little nibble marks on that. But the wires themselves aren't damaged, but all of the wires broke there, and then that was all eaten away as well. So the neutral light wasn't, well, the cable's still on, but only by one strand of copper. So I basically had to fix that at the same time. Saw it, thought couldn't leave it, went to pull it off, and then the whole thing just fell apart in my hands. So I've had to solder that back together again, stick that back on. These things, it's exciting, isn't it? See? Safe for the customer to, no. This looks a bit sketch, but it's actually the easiest way of doing it. So K&N used to sell you a bottle that had a little tiny hole in it, and it had like a little lip, and then the little bleeder thing there, so you could run along the thing. They discontinued that years ago, and I don't have one anymore. So we have a Carex bottle with a little bit of tin foil and a tiny little hole in it, and it does the same job. So that's what we're gonna do, is you just wanna run a tiny little bead of oil on top of each pleat. Don't worry, it doesn't need to be perfect. So just like that. Little boil of it, little bead of oil. And then you do the exact same thing on both sides, so do the same on the other side as well. And then you're sorted. It's just tape. It's just tape. What you like about it? It tastes sweet, but I don't, can't answer that question. That we've ended up with bookings for that day. All right, okay, you're on me, you're getting on me fucking tits. Stick it on your head. I love my dog, don't. I love my dog, I love my dog, I love my dog. Hey, good boy. Air filter is in. ECU's been flashed and it's all the race tool stuff has been activated on there as well. This is open because I take the RPM signal from here. We've now got the button on. Whoo! That's the exciting button. It makes woo-woo noises. So this is just purely for pit lane limiter. So basically when you press that in, it'll limit to a certain revs. Right now I think we've got it limited to 4,000 revs. But that's completely controllable, so we can set it to whatever we want. So that's that button. And then the quick shifter sensor is all in, and then that is all wired up. Now, obviously, you add in wire into these, and you got to try and keep it as neat as possible so that it doesn't foul on anything, get caught on anything, whatever. So this button now runs along the original harness, and then up there, obviously, you can't, I'd like a break point here, but we can't, so it is what it is. Now this runs down the original loom and then completely disappears, so you cannot see it because, I don't know. There's no real reason. You could be a bit messy with it, but I just can't. So that's that done. So it's super neat. The original gear position indicator as well, the gremlins got in the head and I had to tidy that wiring up as well. And then on the right-hand side, we've obviously got the rear sets are all on, the brake master cylinder's on, and then we needed to change out the hydraulic to the hydraulic pressure switch as well. So that's now wired in as well, so that's all tucked away neat. When you're doing these, so basically whenever you buy one of these, it won't come with the attachment that you need to plug into the original plug. You've got two options there. You can either cut off the plug from the harness and then put on spade connectors, or these normally come in like bullet points or whatever. You can run them, not bullet points, bullet connectors. You can put bullet points on them if you want. But whatever which way you do it, give yourself enough length, because these are adjustable, to be able to position this wherever you need it to be. So this has gone back on, new washers in it. It's been bled back up, which to be fair, it was terrible. There was no brake there at all. So now, wow, amazing for the times that you sat on the grid and you want to use the back brake because you don't really use it that much. So that's all done. The other thing as well with these, once you've set them all on, this is adjustable. So the only way to adjust the position of where the actual lever is to adjust this. So this is just a rod that pushes inside, then pushes the hydraulic fluid through, and there's little valves and stuff inside here. But basically all you need to do is crack this nut off and then spin the entire, because this isn't fixed to anything, it's just a push rod. So all you basically do is spin the entire shaft, and that'll basically unwind itself from, it's not clevis pin, from the actual brace, the bracket, and it'll push it down or up depending on which way you want to move the lever, and then position that, lock it all out, and then you're done. It's important to make sure that everything's in position. I mean, it's pointless buying rear sets that aren't exactly cheap and then not have them in a nice position to work with them. So just take your time and set them all up. So like for this, once we've got this bled up and everything, I put the seat back on, sat on the bike, and then make sure that they're there or thereabouts. Obviously, it's not my bike, it's customer's bike, but we'll give him a position for where it is now and then tell him how to adjust it, and then he can do what he wants. So that's that. Another quick tip for doing them as well is if you don't know and you're trying to just gauge where it needs to be, if you look behind the bike, originally, if you were only like changing one side, or say for example you're just doing the gear lever, the brake, whatever position the foot peg is in relation to the toe piece on the back brake, your gear lever should be just slightly above that, because obviously you don't put your foot underneath your brake lever, but you do on your gear lever. So you just want it like a centimetre or so higher than your brake lever. If you ever need to set them up and they're already on, that's an idea, just to get you there or thereabouts before you then get on the bike and stuff. That's an idea. So there you go. Right, we're finished, all done, all put back together again. We're happy. It does exactly what it's supposed to be doing. So the quick shift is nice and smooth. The pit lane limiter all works everywhere, and launch control works and everything, all that good stuff. And it's all mapped up so it's smooth everywhere. So what you've seen on some of the graphs is we have to go through all of those different throttle positions, and then we pull across all our intake air pressure, and we'll do that a couple of times. Same in the ignition. We'll basically go do the ignition, flash that in, see what the adjustments are, and then go back and back and back to make it absolutely perfect. And then we actually revisit the fuel and make sure that's correct after we do the ignition as well. So that's all sorted. So this is all done now. We've started at 152 and we've finished at 163, which is pretty much bang on where these are supposed to be, especially with that system on there. You make a little bit more with the arrow race system, that's just straight through. With the S pipe delete that this is running, it's not into the mid 160s. But it's pretty good. So we're really happy with it. We had to do a few other little bits and bobs to it in the background, including like a little bit of wiring here and there to sort all that stuff out and a bit of cleaning. But other than that, she's good to go. Thanks for joining us doing this full ECU mapping, bottom ECU rear set and race tools package on this blade. It's been pretty good, pretty straightforward. This one's not been too complicated. But if you enjoyed it and you liked it, hit the subscribe button, like it, and then if you've got any questions, please drop them in the bottom and we'll see if we can answer anything that you have to ask us. See you in the next one.